Hello everybody. We looked at middleware, we looked at how we create these routes. Now let's look at something interesting, how to send status codes. You know, the HTTP protocol has these status codes, to indicate that there's an error, and how to send data back. It's also very straightforward. So let's see, there is the HTTP status codes, just so that you could see what they are. Here are the status codes, and you see informational purposes, success. So basically you could see the success responses, you have redirection, you have error. So the most famous ones are 400, and see 400 is a bad request. And you also have 404, which is not found or forbidden or unauthorized 401. And also you have 500s, which are internal server error, like for example, null pointer exception or some exceptions that happen on the server that you'd like to indicate that there is something wrong in the data that's formatted or in the process on the server, also 500. Okay, so let's see how you could send these. So basically, let's go back to the code that you wrote. We had this middleware that's doing this interesting stuff. Now, what we could do is let's just make it a nice middleware that's not gonna crash. Here it is, and I remove the error part. Let's keep the error variable, we'll come back to it, but simple middleware, and here we are. So now let's say we code the users. Okay, so here is the users one, and let's say you are expecting that they specify that they provide some kind of a user ID as a query parameter, for example, right? So we could say that if, for example, request dot query dot ID, right? If this goes through, this means it's fine. Else, we're going to do something else. So now, if it exists, the ID exists, maybe I'll go and get the user, and then I'm going to send back the user. So basically, let's say the user is an object that I'm going to send back, and it has an ID. The user has an ID, and that ID is ID, for example. Or we could say request dot query dot ID, and then maybe the user has a name. And basically, you're going to get this from the database and then return it back. So Bob, right? So that's a nice request. Now, if there is an error, you want to indicate that there is an error. Maybe they don't have the ID, and that ID is required, right? So let's say we pick bad request, right? So bad request, or most probably bad request, right? Or we could even do 404, but let's say bad request. So now to indicate bad request, you say response dot status, and you put the status code. So let's say 400, and then you send. And basically what I'm going to send is maybe the description of the error. Okay, so basically I could say error, and I'm going to indicate that user ID is required, right? And save. So basically now these are the users, right? So let's go here, and I am going to, let me just press enter a couple of times so that it goes up a little bit. And let's say I refresh the screen and nothing happened because we need the users one, right? So basically we are here, API users, and press enter. Now I get back this response, but I don't see the status code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Postman so that you could see also the status code. So here we are, and here we are, and it's a get request, and I click on send, and you could see that it's a bad request. You see 400 is a bad request. Now, if we provide the ID, so question mark ID equals say 100, right? You can see here I added a parameter. Let me remove this body. I don't need this body here. And it's not going to cause a problem, but I just need parameters, the ID. That's what I'm looking for here in the code. You see here I'm looking for a query parameter, right? And that's a query parameter. Click on send, and then you see I'm getting back a response, and the status code is 200. So you can send back, you see here, you're sending back JSON, and you can see here that the data is formatted as JSON, right? So you can look at the headers, and you could see that the content is sent back as JSON, right? You can also set up headers and a lot of interesting things back to the requester. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.